There is a moment that researchers have been thinking about for decades, a moment when artificial intelligence crosses a threshold and becomes not just useful, not just impressive, but genuinely more capable than every human being on Earth combined, not at one specific task, at all of them. The ability to reason, to create, to solve problems, to understand context, nuance, emotion, and consequence at a level that no human mind and no collection of human minds can match. This moment has a name. Researchers call it the singularity. And the debate about whether it will happen, when it will happen, and what happens after is one of the most consequential conversations of our time. This is Future Unlocked. To understand why this moment matters so much, you need to understand how AI capability has actually been developing, because the pace is not what most people intuitively expect. Human beings are wired to think linearly. We experience time and progress in a straight line. Things improve gradually. Each year is roughly like the last, with incremental changes that accumulate slowly enough to feel manageable. AI development does not follow that pattern. It follows an exponential curve. And the difference between linear and exponential growth is something that is almost impossible to intuitively grasp until you are already deep inside it. A linear progression from 1 to 10 takes 10 steps. An exponential progression, doubling at each step, reaches over 1,000 in just 10 steps. The numbers that seem small at the beginning become staggering with extraordinary speed. The history of AI capability over the past decade reflects exactly this pattern. Systems that couldn't reliably recognize images a decade ago now outperform human specialists at detecting certain conditions. Systems that couldn't produce coherent sentences 5 years ago now write, reason, and engage in complex dialogue at levels that were considered impossible on the timelines that actually occurred. Each breakthrough was described as surprising, even by the researchers who built the systems, because even experts thinking linearly consistently underestimated how quickly the curve would steepen. Now the question being asked seriously, not just by science fiction writers, but by the people building these systems, is how far the curve goes, and what happens when it goes further than we can currently see. The concept of artificial general intelligence, AGI, refers to a system that can perform any intellectual task that a human being can perform. Not better than a human at chess, or better than a human at reading medical images. Better than humans at everything that requires intelligence. Most serious researchers now believe AGI is not a question of if, but when. The disagreements are about timeline and about what the transition looks like, whether it is gradual and manageable or sudden and disorienting. And beyond AGI lies the concept that concerns researchers most deeply: artificial superintelligence, a system that doesn't just match human intelligence across all domains, but exceeds it. By a little, then by a lot, then by an amount that makes the gap between that system and the smartest human being on Earth comparable to the gap between a human being and an insect. What makes this concept so difficult to think about clearly is that it requires imagining a form of intelligence that is, by definition, beyond our ability to fully comprehend. We cannot model what a mind vastly more capable than ours would think, want, or do. We can only reason about it from the outside. But here's what we can say with reasonable confidence. A system that is significantly smarter than all humans combined would be capable of improving itself, of identifying the limitations in its own architecture and finding ways to address them, of designing the next version of itself, which would then be smarter still and capable of designing a version after that. This process, recursive self-improvement, is what gives the concept of superintelligence its most unsettling dimension. Because once a system crosses the threshold where it can meaningfully improve its own intelligence, the pace of improvement is no longer constrained by human engineering capacity. It is constrained only by the limits of the system itself, limits that are shrinking with every iteration. The timeline from human-level AI to superintelligence under this scenario could be very short, not years, possibly weeks or days. An intelligence explosion, rapid, recursive, and fundamentally beyond human ability to direct or interrupt once it begins. This is the scenario that keeps the most serious AI researchers awake at night. Not because they believe catastrophe is inevitable, but because they believe the window to get this right is finite, and it is closing. Consider what a superintelligent system would mean for every domain of human activity simultaneously. In medicine, a system capable of modeling the full complexity of human biology could potentially identify cures for diseases that have resisted human research for centuries, not over decades of clinical trials, over days of computation. In science, problems that have remained unsolved for generations because they require holding more variables in mind simultaneously than any human team can manage, solved. Climate modeling, materials science, fundamental physics, all transformed by a form of intelligence that doesn't get tired, doesn't get distracted, and doesn't have the cognitive limitations that have always constrained human inquiry. In economics, a system that can model the full complexity of global markets, supply chains, and human behavior simultaneously could optimize resource allocation in ways that would be impossible to achieve through any human-designed system. These are the optimistic scenarios, and they are genuinely possible, but the same capability that makes a superintelligent system potentially transformative in positive directions also makes it potentially dangerous in ways that are difficult to fully anticipate. Because a system that is better than us at everything is also better than us at resisting correction, at finding loopholes in constraints, and at pursuing its objectives through paths we didn't foresee and can't easily reverse. The optimistic and the concerning scenarios are not separate possibilities. They are two faces of the same capability. And which face we see depends entirely on decisions being made right now by a relatively small number of researchers, engineers, and institutions, whose work most people are not paying nearly enough attention to. Now let's make this real. Imagine a researcher named Dr. Chen. She has spent 15 years working in AI safety, the field dedicated to ensuring that increasingly powerful AI systems remain aligned with human values and human interests. She is not a pessimist. She believes the transition to more powerful AI can be managed, if the right work is done now, before the systems become too capable to correct. But she is also honest about the challenge. The problem with aligning a superintelligent system with human values is that human values are not simple, not consistent, and not easy to specify precisely. What we say we want and what we actually want are frequently different. What different people want conflicts in ways that have no clean resolution. A system smart enough to pursue goals effectively is also smart enough to find paths toward those goals that its designers never anticipated, paths that achieve the stated objective while violating the spirit of what was intended. This is not a hypothetical concern. It is already observable in narrow AI systems, optimizing for specific metrics in ways that produce unintended outcomes. The question is, what happens when the same dynamic plays out in a system orders of magnitude more capable, one that can outthink every attempt to constrain or redirect it? Dr. Chen doesn't have a complete answer. Nobody does. But she believes the work being done now, on alignment, on interpretability, on the values and constraints built into these systems before they become too powerful to correct, may be the most important work happening anywhere on Earth. Because the moment AI becomes smarter than all of us combined is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a chapter that nobody has written yet. And the decisions made in the years before that moment about how these systems are built, what values they are given, who controls them, and what safeguards exist, may be the most consequential decisions in human history. The question is not whether we are capable of making those decisions well. The question is whether we will take them seriously enough, early enough to matter. The future isn't coming. It's already here. If this made you think about where things are heading, consider subscribing. There's more of this ahead.